Imagine this. You're lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling. Your body is still, but your mind is already running through conversations that haven't happened, decisions you haven't made, outcomes you can't control. You are here, but your thoughts are somewhere else. Now ask yourself how much of your suffering comes not from what is, but from what might be. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, believed that most of our pain is not rooted in the present moment. It's born in the future in a world that doesn't exist yet. In his letters and writings, he returned again and again to a simple, radical idea. You are tormented not by life itself, but by your imagination of it. And this is where our journey begins. The illusion of control. We suffer so deeply over things that haven't happened. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." You see, the mind is a masterful storyteller. It anticipates, it calculates, it plans. But the problem isn't the mind's ability to look ahead, it's our attachment to what it sees. Think about it. How often do you find yourself trying to mentally solve the future? You imagine different outcomes, rehearse different scenarios like chess games against invisible opponents. This is not strategy. This is anxiety, and anxiety, Seneca warned, is born from a false belief, the belief that we can control what hasn't yet arrived. But the Stoics knew something profound. Control is a myth. What you truly own is smaller than you think. Your actions, your thoughts, your responses. Everything else, fate, timing, outcomes, is in the hands of fortune. And so, Seneca advises us not to cling to the wheel of time, but to return to something far more powerful, the present. The present is refuge. Close your eyes for a moment. Strip away everything that isn't happening right now. Not tomorrow's meeting, not next week's uncertainty, not the next conversation or confrontation. Just this moment, your breath, your awareness. Your being. This, Seneca believed, is where peace lives. Not in some future event that finally aligns with your hopes, not in the relief of a perfect outcome, but in the ability to stand fully in the present and say, "This is enough." In his letters to Lucilius, Seneca often reminded his student to confine yourself to the present, not because the present is safe or easy, but because it is real. The future, he said, is a form of mental debt. The more time you spend there, the more interest you pay in stress, distraction, and dread. But how do we return? How do we bring a restless mind back into a grounded life? Anticipation, the thief of joy. Seneca didn't just study philosophy, he lived through crises. He was exiled, betrayed, forced to live under the reign of a violent emperor, and yet he cultivated serenity. How? By practicing what he called premeditatio. Malorm, the premeditation of evils. Instead of resisting fear, he looked it in the eye. He imagined the worst, not to be consumed by it, but to strip it of power. If you're terrified of losing something, a job, a person, your reputation, Seneca would tell you, imagine it gone. Feel the grief. Touch the fear, and then realize you are still here. The Stoic approach isn't denial. It's preparation without obsession. It's clarity without control. When you anticipate consciously, you define the future. When you worry unconsciously, the future devours you. This is why Seneca warned, he suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary. Time is a mental construct. Have you ever noticed how long a single minute can feel when you're anxious, or how an entire afternoon can disappear when you're fully present? Seneca was fascinated by the human relationship with time, not clock time, but psychological time. He believed we don't truly live in years or days, we live in thoughts. And most of our thoughts are anchored to what is not yet here. You plan, you worry, you brace, and in doing so, you trade the certainty of now for the illusion of later. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. We waste time not just in distraction, but in mental elsewhere. In checking and rechecking what could go wrong. In imagining arguments that never occur, embracing for a future that may never arrive. But what would it look like to return to actually inhabit the moment you're in? That, Seneca believed, is the beginning of freedom. The power of enough. There's a reason why so many of us cling to the future. We've been taught that what we have is never enough. Not enough time, not enough success. Not enough progress. But Seneca would ask, enough for what? Is this breath not enough? Is this moment of stillness not full of everything you need? In his writings, Seneca returns again and again to one word, sufficiency. The present, no matter how plain, is always sufficient if you allow it to be. But this is a spiritual discipline. It requires the courage to stop running. To stop chasing, to let the moment unfold without demanding anything from it. Because here's the paradox: the more you seek control over the future, the more you suffer, but the more you surrender to the present, the more power you reclaim. Not control. Agency. The kind of power that isn't about outcomes but about inner alignment. Return to the ground beneath. Take a breath. Feel your feet on the floor. Notice the air against your skin. For a moment, let the world be enough. This is not an escape from life, it is the entrance into it. Seneca didn't want you to ignore the future. He wanted you to remember that you only meet the future one moment at a time. And when you arrive there, it will not be the future. It will be now. So stop rehearsing pain. Stop bargaining with fate. Stop building stories that haven't happened yet. Come back. Right here. Right now. This is the only place you've ever truly lived. The final insight is a line from Seneca that echoes through time. True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. That's it. Not to conquer time, not to predict it, not to outsmart it. But to meet it as it comes fully, honestly. Courageously. Because when you stop living in imagined catastrophes and unpromised tomorrows, when you stop letting your peace depend on what hasn't happened, you begin to reclaim the most precious thing of all, your life. And now, the choice is yours. Will you stay lost in futures that may never come? Or will you return again and again to the only place joy can truly be found, the present? Because you are not meant to suffer your life, you are meant to live it. But returning to the present is harder than it seems. You try, you take a deep breath, you close your eyes, and for a moment there's quiet. But then, it creeps in again, the unfinished conversation, the job application you haven't heard back from, the subtle fear that something might go wrong. Your mind whispers, what if? And just like that, you're gone again, not in body, but in thought. In a world that doesn't exist, but that still holds power over you. Seneca understood this pull deeply. That's why, in his teachings, he didn't merely say live in the moment. He gave us tools, mental disciplines to train the mind to return. Because the present is not just something you enter. It's something you must practice. The practice of returning. Think of the mind as a wild horse. It doesn't obey you because you tell it to. It obeys you because you've trained it patiently over time. Seneca didn't expect tranquility to appear magically. He worked for it every day. He reflected. He journaled. He asked, what did I do today that was within my control? What did I allow to disturb me that didn't need to? What fears did I rehearse that never came true? This wasn't indulgent overthinking, it was a kind of spiritual weightlifting. The goal wasn't perfection. It was awareness. Because every time you become aware of where your mind has gone, you have the power to bring it back. And that single act of returning is liberation. Letting go of the then the most dangerous word in the modern vocabulary isn't hate. It isn't fear. It's then. When I finally get the job, then I'll feel secure. When I lose the weight, then I'll be confident. When they understand me, then I'll feel at peace. But what if that never comes? Seneca saw how often people wasted their lives in delay, postponing peace to some distant horizon. He wrote, while we wait for life, life pauses, and so he asked a radical question. What if you stop waiting? Not in the sense of giving up, but in the deeper sense of being enough, here and now, without needing anything else to justify your presence on this earth. This wasn't passivity, it was sovereignty, because the one who does not need tomorrow to justify today cannot be enslaved by fear. The myth of more time. How often do you say, I don't have time? Seneca would challenge you. He wrote a short work titled On the Shortness of Life, and in it, he makes a brutal observation. Life is not short. We just waste so much of it. Not waste in the obvious way, scrolling, binging, distracting, but waste in the invisible way, by not being present for the time we already have. You can live 80 years, but if you spend them rehearsing fears, chasing after later, and refusing to inhabit this moment, how much of that life was truly yours? Seneca said, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And the worst kind of waste, living every day as if it's just a bridge to the next. The courage to slow down, returning to the present, requires bravery. Because when you slow down, you start to feel. The silence grows louder. The thoughts you've been avoiding begin to surface. The pain, the grief, the confusion, and this is where most people turn back, because distraction is easier than depth. Scrolling is easier than sitting down. Future planning is easier than feeling. But Seneca believed that the human soul, like a muscle, grows through tension. That discomfort isn't a sign to escape, it's a signal to listen. What is your anxiety trying to show you? What illusion is it protecting? Often, it's this, the belief that if we just plan enough, we can avoid pain. But the truth is no amount of planning will protect you from being human. And paradoxically, it is only when we stop trying to outrun life that we can finally live it. What will you regret? Seneca asked us to imagine something sobering, our own deathbed, not as a morbid exercise, but as a mirror, because the clarity that comes at the end can help us see more clearly now. If you could speak to your future self, the one with only moments left, what would they say? Would they beg you to spend more time in fear? Would they ask you to keep checking, refreshing, rehearsing? Or would they plead with you to come back to this breath, this hour, this chance? Seneca believed that philosophy was not about abstract thoughts. It was about learning how to die before you die so you can finally live without fear. To let go of what you cannot control, to make peace with what you cannot predict, and to anchor yourself in what remains, the now, the only place life has ever happened. What would life feel like if you truly surrendered to it? Not in resignation, but in reverence. Seneca believed that peace is not a reward at the end of striving, it is a skill, practiced moment by moment. And one of the greatest enemies of this peace is the illusion of permanence we suffer when we believe the future is owed to us. We plan our weeks, our years, our retirements as if time were a guarantee. But time is not something we possess, it is something we are constantly spending. And so Seneca reminds us, you act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. You fear death because you know you're human, but you desire endlessly, as if life will always continue, as if there's always more time to come back to yourself later. The trap of someday. We all live with a subtle fantasy that we'll begin living more fully someday, when the stress is over, when the schedule clears, when life settles down. But here's the truth Seneca saw. Life is happening while we're waiting for life to begin. There's no later version of you who will be better equipped to live with presence. There is only now, this version of you, this imperfect, distracted, anxious, beautiful human being who is already enough. The irony is that most people never find peace because they keep chasing it in the future, and yet peace was never there. It was always here, but we were too busy planning to notice. The philosophy of presential of the Stoics. Presence was not simply mindfulness. It was the foundation of freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom from overreaction. Freedom from the tyranny of imagined futures. Seneca wrote often about Fortuna, the unpredictable force of fate. You cannot bargain with her, you cannot predict her movements, but you can choose how to meet her. He said, the man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. In other words, if you've already accepted that you're not in control of the future, then you can meet it with grace rather than panic. And in doing so, you become truly untouchable. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer at war with what you cannot change. Anchoring yourself in the now. Let's return to your breath, the air entering your nose, the sensation of your body in the chair, the weight of gravity pulling you downward. This is not spiritual escapism. It is a radical act of defiance against the culture of distraction. A culture that tells you, keep moving, keep striving, keep escaping this moment because something better is just ahead. But what if nothing is ahead? What if this is it? Could you sit with that? Could you love that? Seneca believed that when we finally anchor ourselves in the present, we become unshakable. Not because the present is comfortable, but because it is true. And truth, however raw, is always more healing than illusion. Letting go with a chance. There is a moment in every Stoic's journey where they must confront their deepest fear. What if nothing goes the way I want it to? Seneca would tell you that's not failure, that's liberation, because the more you let go of the chase, the more life reveals itself not as something to conquer, but as something to witness, to participate in. To appreciate. To be shaped by. He said, begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. One day. One life. Could you live today this strange, quiet, flawed day as if it were enough? Could you stop waiting for peace to arrive and realize it's already here, disguised in stillness? The quiet gift of mortality. Seneca often meditated on death, not to frighten himself, but to remember the preciousness of time. He called death the greatest teacher because it reveals what matters. It dissolves illusion. It silences the noise of urgency and reveals what was important all along. He wrote, let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. It's not morbid. It's clarity. You do not have to fear the future, because the only thing that truly belongs to you is this moment. And if you can love it, if you can enter it fully, you've already escaped 90% of the suffering that plagues most people. Because suffering, Seneca reminds us, is not the product of reality. It is the child of expectation and attachment. And when you release both, you begin to taste freedom. Now pause. Ask yourself, quietly and honestly, what would your life look like if you stopped running? Not running from pain. Not running toward goals. Not running through time like it's a hallway leading to something more real. But simply stopping. Breathing. Being. Seneca believed that stillness was not weakness. It was wisdom. Because in stillness, you begin to see clearly what was clouded by movement. You begin to understand that most of your suffering was self-inflicted, not because you are flawed, but because your mind was trained to live anywhere but here. The future is not your enemy. Let's be clear, Seneca did not reject the future. He planned, he worked, he advised rulers, but he did not worship it. The future, in his view, is a neutral space, neither your salvation nor your doom. It becomes painful only when you ask it to carry the weight of your peace. Seneca wrote, "What is to come is uncertain. Live immediately. Live immediately, not recklessly, not impulsively, but deeply, with presence, with awareness." This is the paradox of Stoicism. The more you let go of controlling time, the more power you have within time. Because anxiety thrives in abstraction, but peace only exists in the concrete. This breath, this room. This moment. You were never meant to predict. You were meant to participate. Modern life tells you to forecast, anticipate, hedge. Your entire nervous system is wired for defense against imagined futures, against uncertain outcomes. But Seneca reminds us of something far older, far deeper. You were not born to calculate every step. You were born to feel the ground under your feet. To respond to life as it comes, not perfectly, but consciously. And if you fall, so be it. That too is part of the moment. He wrote, "It is not that we are given a short life, but we make it short. We are not ill-supplied, but wasteful of it. The question, then, is not, how do I make my life longer? It is, how do I make the time I already have mine?" The art of it. Or return again to this moment. Look around, not metaphorically, literally. Where are you? What is the light like? What sound do you hear beneath the noise? This is your life, not the life you'll have when everything goes according to plan. Not the life you built in your mind. This one, and here is the quiet miracle, it is already enough, even in its incompleteness. Even with the questions unanswered, even with the fears still flickering at the edge of your thoughts, Seneca invites you to stop waiting, to stop outsourcing joy to the future. To stop living conditionally, I'll be at peace when, because the when will never come, only the now ever does. And if you miss this, you miss everything. The final transformations. What does it mean to live like a Stoic? Not to suppress emotion, not to hide from chaos. But to be so rooted in the present that the storms of life lose their power to move you. To be like a tree, not unshaken, but unbroken. To accept that the future is not yours, but your response to this moment is. And that's where your strength lives. Not in control, but in alignment. Seneca's final gift is this: the realization that life was never about getting somewhere. It was always about waking up again and again to what is already here. The choice is yours. I've listened. You've paused. You've reflected. Now comes the only moment that matters. What will you do with this day? Will you let it slip into the future you keep trying to predict, or will you claim it? Feel it. Live it fully, tenderly, truthfully. Because there is no better future waiting to make you whole. There is no perfect version of you waiting to arrive. There is only this. And in this, everything you've been searching for is already quietly waiting. Now the choice is yours. Will you suffer the future, or will you return to the present and finally live?